President Trump made a statement to the nation about the shooting.
As you all know, shortly after 7 a.m. this morning, a gunman opened fire on members of Congress and their staffs as they were practicing for tomorrow's annual charity baseball game. Authorities are continuing to investigate the crime, and the assailant has now died from his injuries. The FBI is leading the investigation and will continue to provide updates as new information becomes available. Congressman Steve Scalise, a member of House leadership, was shot and badly wounded and is now in stable condition at the hospital, along with two very courageous Capitol Police officers. At least two others were also wounded. Many lives would have been lost if not for the heroic actions of the two Capitol Police officers who took down the gunman despite sustaining gunshot wounds during a very, very brutal assault. Melania and I are grateful for their heroism and praying for the swift recovery of all victims. Congressman Scalise is a friend, and a very good friend. He's a patriot, and he's a fighter. He will recover from this assault. And Steve, I want you to know that you have the prayers not only of the entire city behind you, but of an entire nation and, frankly, the entire world. America is praying for you, and America is praying for all of the victims of this terrible shooting. I spoke with Steve's wife, Jennifer, and I pledged to her our full and absolute support, anything she needs. We're with her and with the entire Scalise family. I have also spoken with Chief Matthew Verderosa. He's doing a fantastic job of the Capitol Police to express our sympathies for his wounded officers and to express my admiration for their courage. Our brave Capitol Police perform a challenging job with incredible skill, and their sacrifice makes democracy possible. We also commend the brave first responders from Alexandria Police Fire and Rescue who rushed to the scene. Everyone on that field is a public servant. Our courageous police, our congressional aides who work so tirelessly behind the scenes with enormous devotion, and our dedicated members of Congress who represent our people. We may have our differences, but we do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country. We can all agree that we are blessed to be Americans, that our children deserve to grow up in a nation of safety and peace, and that we are strongest when we are unified and when we work together for the common good. Please take a moment today to cherish those you love and always remember those who serve and keep us safe. God bless them all. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you.
Well, let's bring in the BBC's Rajini Vaidyanathan, who's at the scene. Rajini, can you help us get more of an idea of how this attack played out, please?
Well, it was in the early hours of the morning, probably just before 6:30 or so, I think that a group of Republican senators and congressmen and staffers crossed over the river from Washington, D.C. to nearby Virginia to practice for that charity baseball game, which is still going to take place tomorrow. It's an annual event where the Democrats and Republicans play each other every year, as I say. And it was at 7:06 a.m. that police say they received the first emergency call. And witnesses, many of them, of course, serving members of Congress, described seeing a gunman fire as many as 50 to 100 shots. Witnesses say that he was armed with a rifle. And it was while this practice was actually taking place. And as President Trump outlined just then, and many other witnesses have also really praised the swift action of the Capitol Police Force. I should say, Ros, because Steve Scalise is a senior member of the House Republicans, he was travelling with a security detail from the Capitol Police, and that is why those police officers were on hand to react very quickly, and many are really crediting them for the fact that there were no fatalities, apart, of course, for the gunman himself.
So we have these 50 to 100 shots fired, Regini. Were the congressmen on the baseball pitch? Did the attacker come onto the pitch where they were?
That's what some reports are saying. There are reports that there were various congressmen on different bases of the baseball field, and that the attacker came onto the field and opened fire. Of course, we're just hearing reports. The official police account hasn't really been released, but it's all about what happened on that pitch. And I believe from what the congressman is saying that he actually came onto the pitch. Now, as I said just then, the assailant, it's been confirmed, has died. As you mentioned before, he was named as James T. Hodgkinson from Illinois, and he was 66. Now, we were also hearing that he was actually a volunteer for the Bernie Sanders election campaign. And earlier today, Senator Sanders spoke very vehemently condemning the attack and describing it as sickening. And that is, of course, following reports that the attacker was a volunteer on his campaign. The FBI is now taking over the investigation, and they say they are looking at every possible motive. Some people at the news conference that was happening here earlier said, is this a possible assassination attempt? And they didn't rule that out, but at the moment they say they're not being drawn on specific motives, but clearly that will be one of the lines of inquiry.
And Regina, you spent a lot of time reporting on Capitol Hill. How easy is it for members of the public to come into direct contact with congressmen and women?
It's fairly easy, to be honest. Certainly in the halls of Congress, you know, many areas, as is the same with the UK Parliament, are open public spaces. That's the whole part of making sure that people connect directly with democracy. Of course, I should stress, though, there is a huge security check that you have to go through. It's the same in the UK Parliament, where you have to go through airport-style security. You have to get your bags scanned. But of course, this happened away from all of that anyway, across the river from Washington in Virginia, at a baseball pitch in you know, early in the morning on a very bright sunny day. So it's really difficult to sort of have security for something like that, because these kind of baseball games happen all the time. And as I said before, many people are really crediting the fact that there happened to be Capitol Hill police on the location, and they were able to step in so quickly, Ros, and you know, take the attacker out.
I can see the media behind you, Regina, and a couple of police cars. So what exactly is happening at the scene now, please?
Well, Ros, if I just look further down, there's still a number of police cars, although the number of media has certainly gone down. Now, just further down from here, there's a church on the left. If you keep going down, you can see there's a YMCA there. We just moved the camera for you. And it's just behind that that the baseball field is. So it's a couple of streets down there. And, of course, there's police tape because it's you know, a crime scene still. So we can't get that far down. But obviously lots of police cars. But the really important point to stress is that this investigation is now being handled by the FBI. That is because it involves members of Congress. Of course, the initial response did involve local police forces here as well.
Regina, viewers in the US will know Congressman Scalise, but for people watching outside of America, can you tell us a little bit about him?
Well, Steve Scalise was, as we saw just then from the statement from President Trump, very close to the president, a very senior Republican in Congress, the House Majority Whip, so the person responsible for rounding up Republicans when it comes to votes. So a senior member of Congress representing a district in the state of Louisiana in the south of the United States. He's held that seat since 2008 and became the whip about 3 years ago. So someone who's definitely a rising star, someone who is also close to the president. And it's worth mentioning that in the group of people who were on the baseball pitch today, as well as a number of politicians that people may have heard of, people like Senator Rand Paul, who ran for the Republican nomination during the last election. There was also an aide to the Vice President Mike Pence who was there as well. So a lot of high-level Republicans all getting ready for this baseball game, which is still going to take place tomorrow despite what's happened.
OK, Regina, thank you for bringing us right up to date. There's Regina live with us in Virginia. Now, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Paul Ryan, has addressed the House about this attack.
My colleagues, there are very strong emotions throughout this House today. We are all horrified by this dreadful attack on our friends and on our colleagues and those who serve and protect this Capitol. We are all praying for those who are attacked and for their families. Steve Scalise, Zachary Barth, Matt Micah, Special Agent David Bailey, Special Agent Crystal Griner. We are all giving our thoughts to those currently being treated for their injuries at this moment. And we are united. We are united in our shock. We are united in our anguish. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
Well, every high-profile shooting in the US immediately reignites gun control arguments. This is the Virginia Governor, Terry McAuliffe.
I talk about this every single day. This is a very serious issue. You know, I just came with Colonel Flaherty recently. You know, we just buried one of our great state troopers, a special agent, with a wife and 3 young children, needless, senseless. So we've got to look at this, but I'm not going to get anywhere near the investigation. The FBI is leading this.
Sir, there's so much acrimony right now in the political discourse and dialogue in this country. There's so much back and forth and venomous discussion. Are you concerned that that climate in any way contributed to what we saw today, or do you have thoughts about the climate we're in?
I can't answer on today. The investigation is going on. I do think things have become very partisan, very hardened in this country today. We got to begin to work together to get things done. We're the greatest nation on earth, and there has been too much, I believe, raw discourse in this country today that's pulling people apart as general, and we need to work together.
Well, let's bring in Jane O'Brien live with us from Washington. And Jane, whenever these shootings happen, the arguments begin again. I never see much movement from either side, though.
I don't think you'll see much movement this time either, Ros, to be perfectly honest. Gun control is something that comes up every time there is a high-profile shooting, but I think it's worth noting that Steve Scalise, who is the congressman who was injured, voted against tightening gun controls after the Orlando nightclub shooting, which was almost exactly a year ago this week. So the argument is always very divisive in itself. And I think one of the messages coming out loud and clear from Congress, from those involved in this morning's shooting, is that if it hadn't been for heavily armed Capitol Police, the security detail that was there to protect Steve Scalise, this would have been much worse. One congressman told me that if those police hadn't been there, if they hadn't been armed, the shooter could have just picked all of them off at will. They were armed with baseball bats. This man apparently had some sort of semi-automatic rifle. They wouldn't have stood a chance. Just played a clip of Paul Ryan. We also heard from the Virginia governor. Who else has been speaking, Jane? Well, pretty much everyone. But again, what comes across to me most strikingly is that this is being viewed not just as an attack on Republican colleagues playing on a beautiful morning, practicing a game of baseball outside Washington. This is being viewed as an attack on Congress. And these calls for unity that we're hearing from Paul Ryan, from President Trump himself, one of the most divisive politicians in the nation, are really a testament to just how threatened Congress feels right now. We, as you know, Ros, you've reported this, I've reported this, the rhetoric in Washington over the last year has been appalling. It's toxic, it's downright nasty. And there is a real sense among congressmen that they've got to start pulling together, that they can't let this type of rhetoric get into the public domain and feed people who may be inclined to violence. Obviously, the motive of the gunman is still being investigated. The investigation itself is still in its very early stages, but there is this real sense that there has to be a new emphasis on unity.
But Jane, while there's that emphasis now, and I'm sure every congressman and woman is unified in their sympathy for those who have been attacked, in reality, in practical terms, where's this unity going to come from? How's it going to manifest itself?
Very good question, because although congressmen, senators may have a desire to be gentlemanly or ladylike or however you want to describe it, there is still this thing called social media, and that's where a lot of the inflammatory rhetoric finds its home. And we know that reports at the moment about the alleged shooter himself, James Hodgkinson, he was very active on social media and posted a number of postings that were anti-Trump. Bernie Sanders, whose campaign he supported during the nomination process. Bernie Sanders was a challenger for Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary. He actually made a statement today saying that he's appalled and sickened by this, condemned the attack in the strongest possible terms. But I think that Congress realizes that it now has to lead by example.
Jane, thank you very much for updating us. This Jane live with this from Washington, D.C.